because I'll start again, because you guys in the room are important. You know, we've just, my name is Ngaire Blankenberg. I'm the director of the museum here. And very, very pleased to see you all here, so welcome. I just got back from South Africa, where we did an event in South Africa, and it was a similar thing where, you know, it doesn't matter how many people are in the room, you're just waiting for the video to start. And the irony is that we had done a exhibition, I guess, there, and one of the performance pieces was called Fake News. And it was in itself was a reflection of that phenomena, that even if we are sitting there face to face, half the time we look for the truth, not in what we're saying to each other, but what happens on our phone. So life imitates art, media, etc. Are we good to go? Yeah? So anyway, welcome very much. I'm very happy to see you here. We're starting our +234 Connect Festival, which kicked off today. +234, which all of you I hope know, is the area code for Nigeria. And this festival is a celebration of Nigerian creativity and culture. And so we're extremely delighted to have our panelists here today. It goes on for 5 days. It'll go past Nigerian Independence Day on Saturday till Sunday. And there's going to be a lot on view. We have conversations such as this one, film screenings that we're about to see. There will be 2 exhibitions, which I really encourage you to take a look at. They're amazing exhibitions. Family Day, what else are we doing? Music concert, a whole bunch of stuff. And so you can see on the upstairs when you came in, there was a schedule of what's happening, and also on our website, you can check that out. But today in particular, I'm absolutely delighted to have an ongoing conversation. We launched 2 weeks ago in Johannesburg this series that we're calling African Artist Host Conversations. And the idea behind the series is very much that we believe artists of all different kinds, like you're seeing here, have a really important voice when it comes to conversations around things that matter to all of us. And so we want to give artists that platform, and we want to have those conversations with different kinds of artists in all kinds of forms and all kinds of media. So I'm particularly delighted here today to introduce you to 3 incredible artists whose work we will be seeing much of throughout the week. So I'll start with Iké here. Iké Udé is the amazing artist and photographer behind the Iké Udé Nollywood Portraits exhibition behind us here. And we've had the honor of presenting that exhibition. It was delayed somewhat through COVID, but from February this year, and it will be on till February next year. And I strongly recommend that you bring everyone that you know to come and see it, because it's a spectacular exhibition. So throughout his career, Iké has consistently challenged distinctions between art, performance, and style, and has positioned himself at the forefront of each. Udé is perhaps most widely recognized for his performative, often autobiographical approach to photography, which is typically bold, ironic, playful, and inquisitive. With the launch of his art, culture, and fashion magazine, Iké Udé, in '95, Udé set the standard for what would become a trend of similar magazines worldwide. The title, I'm not sure who was around in New York at that time, pays homage to the quintessentially stylish Jamaican rude boys of the 50s and 60s. With Nollywood Portraits, the artist captures the essence of each of his subjects with the eyes of a master painter. And if you look there, you really see the influence of painting in Iké's work. A keen student and critic of art history, Udé brings in stylistic elements reminiscent of David, Ingres, Sargent, and Raphael, if you know your art history, as is evident in the School of Nollywood mural. So I'm very happy to have you here, Iké, and welcome.
My pleasure.
Yolanda here, Okereke, is an independent costume designer for film and television and a fashion entrepreneur and stylist. A graduate of chemical engineering, best known as the fashion engineer, aka the fixer or the fashion engineering. Her foray into the industry began in 2005 when, as an actress in a movie titled Sting, she styled herself for the role and also helped to put together the looks of the other actors on set so they could look the part. So that was great. And then that started a lifelong love, I'm hoping, of designing and making clothes. And she soon started her own label called Rani Giselle. Yeah? Well, still in university. But that wasn't enough. She caught the styling bug and launched a new career in fashion styling, which then took her on a journey back to her first love, filmmaking, and becoming Nollywood's foremost and renowned costume designer. So Yolanda now designs and styles for film, theaters, and commercials. She recently represented Nigeria at the Essence Film Festival in New Orleans. And she's worked on some of the biggest Nollywood films shot internationally, which include Chief Daddy 2 in Dubai, La Femme Anjola, South Africa, 10 Days in Sun City, South Africa, The Accidental Spy, Wedding Party, and a hotel called Memory. So yay. So I can read, so thank you very much for being here. And last but definitely not least is Mimi Bartels, who has over 14 years of experience in production, film distribution, media, marketing, communications, and alternative investments. She's currently head of production at Filmone Entertainment, the largest distribution production company in West Africa. Prior to this, she was head of accounts for Nollywood and independent films. Filmone is also home to Warner Brothers, Disney, Sony, 20th Century Fox, Empire Entertainment in West Africa, and premium Nollywood content, including West Africa's biggest box office local content movie, King of Boys 1. It's good, you've got a good publicist. The Wedding Party 1 and 2, etc. Mimi also holds a 2-1 business admin degree from Liverpool John Moore University. And so thank you very much, Mimi, for joining us. So I'm going to get up on the stage here, and today we're talking about African beauty, identity, and representation. And I would love to get your comments after this conversation. But first I want to turn to my panelists, and we'll start with you, Iké, because you're closest to me. So tell us a little bit about what you do, in your own words, and why you do it.
Is it working? Okay. My practice is primarily based on issues of representations, and the medium I work in and or with include photography, film, paintings, text, and performance arts.
And why do you work on representation?
Because I can't help it.
What about you two? Yolanda, tell me.
Okay, hi everybody. I'm a costume designer for film and television. That's what I do. And why do I do that? In telling a story, you want to be, as a costume designer or as a filmmaker, you're a truth sayer. So you have to be authentic to seeing what the story is about in terms of interpreting the characters through the costume, the wardrobe, the color choices, what's the story saying. So there's a lot of texture and a lot of work that goes with that. So just being able to tell the story the right way through the clothes, and not just it being fashion, but you understanding why they put in this outfit, in this scene, stuff like that. Yeah.
So give me an example of a process you would go through to tell the story of somebody, a character, through what they wear.
Okay, so typically as human beings, we all have colors that we like. We all have styles of outfits that we like. But some days you might not be feeling your 100, you might be feeling 20, and you might not be dressed as you want to or how you usually would. You might, okay, for example, let me use myself as an example. My favorite colors are black and white. So I'm either in black. If I'm in black, I'm going to work. If I'm in white, I'm just having a nice day. But sometimes I just want to do like a blue, navy blue. I might not be feeling really, really bright, joyful that day. I'm a little gloom. So in film, all those colors kind of tell a story. So if this is red, it's almost like something's about to happen. If it's like a yellow and it's like a chiffon, breezy, that's like you're having a nice chill day. So that's why I said there are different textures and layers as to how you tell it. Yeah.
And I'm going to come to you maybe in a second, but because you started talking about color, I want to flip back to Iké, because color is a really important part of the work that you do. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, color is very, very important in my picture making process and also results, because color is one thing that is prehistory. When you think about yellow, blue, red, they don't go out of fashion. Furnitures might go out of fashion, even costumes might go out of fashion, or you can even locate a particular subject through the costumes or accessories of what they're wearing in a picture, but they can't do that with color. So color is ahistorical and prehistoric, and at the same time present and future. And the emotional import of colors in pictures is immeasurable. To think that color is one thing that musicians envy about visual art says a lot. They talk about colorations in compositions, even though you can't see the color. It goes to show you how expansive color is. It's one amazing emotional tool in making pictures that I'm very much invested in. And also to be able to become very fluent in color, it requires such practice and devotions to the extent become like a reflex. That's when you really know how to use color. So it's not like based on color wheel, or primary color and secondary color. It has to get to the point, become like a reflex. Yeah.
I want to go back to color, but maybe I want to bring you in a little bit. And it struck me with what Iké was saying about the ahistorical nature of color. And the films that you do are actually quite located in the now. Tell me a little bit about what you do and why you do it.
Okay, so you already know my job title is Head of Production, Film 1. But what I tell people that I do is I create your inevitable memories. And I always think about that when I create something, because I grew up loving film. I didn't know I would ever end up in film. I ended up in film because I just came up with the notion of just shut up and do it. And the reason why I got here is, if you know typical Nigerians, we love complaining, it's our thing. We just complain. And I just didn't want to be part of the people that complained, I wanted to be part of the solution. So when I started my career in distribution, I would get Nollywood films and I'm like, oh my God, this is horrible. And I wasn't editing or anything, I just knew I loved film. So I didn't go to film school or anything. I would watch a film, then I would start rearranging the scenes. Then I'll ask, okay, can we shoot this? Can we do an ADR or that, blah, blah. Because I always think to myself, how do I not waste somebody's 90 to 120 minutes of their time? How do I leave them walking away feeling good? And that's why I always say I create your inevitable memories, because I want to be that film that you had your first kiss to, or that wasn't, because you always think about like, oh, when I was in that place, I was watching this film at this time. Like, I just like being a part of that story, to be honest. So yeah, I mean, that's really why I do it, just to make sure that I can be part of somebody's story in one way or the other.
I think that's beautiful. I think a lot of people who create films think a lot about the story they want to tell, but not necessarily about the memories that they are seeking to create. And I guess on that, you've been involved in the film industry in Nigeria for quite some time. What are some of the changes that you've seen in the memories that are being created amongst your audiences?
The changes are so, I mean, first of all, I even want to say thank you to you guys for having us here, because the reason why I even say thank you was when we're driving in, this is my first trip to America, by the way, my very first time being here. Yes, I did not tell you. And we're driving in, and I was like, oh, that's the Pentagon, that's that. And I've never been here, but I knew like how far the way, and then I was like, oh, is that where they shot Forrest Gump? Oh, is that like, because I mean, so like going through that, Nollywood history is so interesting if you actually like look at it, because like the first film really was in like 1926. There was Palava, and then I find it interesting because it was like a silent film, and the best part of Nollywood that I actually love, even though it wasn't called Nollywood then, was 1950s, and I love that part because of that's when the independence happened, and that's where like the oil boom era was, and then the 1960s, all the theaters and everything started being handed back to Nigerians, so they were able to tell their stories in their way. And it really started out as, I just want to tell my story in my way, and then it just became this trend, and the term Nollywood was born in itself. So it came from, I just want to tell my story, or let's even go back. I was under this how do you pronounce it? Colonialism. Yes, all right, fantastic, sorry. I'm now independent, and now I just want to see myself and my story on film. And now it's just become this beautiful work of art. So when they were talking about color, remember I didn't go to film school. I just stumbled on this. And I realized like how every director of photography are so intent on color. Like, this is the palette, it has to be this. And I'm like, why are you so bent up about this color? And then I watch it, and just when they were talking about it now, I just realized how much of an impact you watching this film and how this color comes on and how it affects you in itself. So we've really come from the shoddy camera work to like beautiful photography and beautiful capturing, and even more so beautiful acting, which was a thing because back then I don't know how many Nigerian, because you know theater is very different. Nollywood, like Nigerian theater is very, and I think like in every, sector of like the world of entertainment, the theater people look down on the actors, like the TV actors or whatever. So it was very different. So in terms of like television, it was just like, oh, okay, I just need actors, come, just let's do it. But now there's an art form to it. It's so intense. Like the evolution of Nollywood gives me goosebumps every time. The very fact that we're in Washington, D.C., and I'm about to screen my film, just shows you like the evolution of Nollywood. So, I mean, yeah, it's long. We can talk about this all day. How long?
Oh, we're gonna. Well, until we see your film. I want to go back to the art form. What was it about Nollywood, Iké, that made you want to do Nollywood portraits?
That's quite a very huge question, but I shall give it an attempt. The first time I came across the notion of Nollywood was, I think it was in 2002. I was living out on Lower East Side of Manhattan, and I took a second look to see if there was a typo, and it wasn't a typo. It said Nollywood, and I read the article, and it was about Nigerian film industry, which I never heard of. And I called my sister, who is very close to the Nigerian community in New York. He said, yeah, there is something called Nollywood. It's a Nigerian film industry, and she watches it. And then, I filed that away, and then fast forwarding around 2004 or so, there was a long article in the New Yorker about Nollywood again, and then I took it very seriously, and
Power of the New Yorker. I said the power of the New Yorker.
Yeah. And then I thought, okay, this is very serious now. And then I read about it. I said, okay, this is one of the most important things that's happening in Africa, because when I left Nigeria in around 81, I left it because I didn't quite like how the country was being run by the lousy leaders. So, and here you have something really happening, and it's coming from bottom up, not from top down. And I said I have to find a way to support this industry. And the least I can do is to go there and do their portraiture and bring them to the museum sphere to elevate their narrative, as it were. So that what forced me to do so. And also, if you look at in the West, Hollywood and even Bollywood, they have been championed by a lot of artists, visual artists, that has made the Western film industry very memorable. If you look at, say, Marilyn Monroe wasn't the best actress. I mean, she was a beauty, but Andy Warhol's portrait of Marilyn Monroe has deepened her cultural import for eternity. So I thought that I should do the same thing for Nollywood.
Yolanda, what do you consider to be African beauty?
African beauty is, my definition would be natural, would be strength, would be authenticity, original, because as Africans have gotten through so much, and to have evolved to where we are right now is actually amazing. I remember the first time I saw the Nollywood portrait, and I'm like, whose idea was this? It was so beautiful. What it reminded me of was being in London in Madame Tussauds and seeing the wax figures. So it's almost like our own wax figure, but in pictorial form. So in my table at home, you just see the book right there. I'm like, oh, somebody thought about this and then did that. And it's so beautiful to see that these are all Africans, or just performing art, just motion picture people. I interact with a lot of them, but then it's so cool to see how far we've come. So it's a lot of strength that really does come with African beauty. Yeah.
And you know, one of my experiences that I think of a lot, Iké, when we were with you in Lagos and even back here, is that we're dealing with, you know, the subjects that you photographed are stars in their own right who have cameras in their face all the time. And what I loved so much was how thrilled they were to have your camera in particular, was to have that kind of sensitivity and the grace to recognize that kind of beauty, and not just perhaps a more mediated or paparazzi camera. I found that really curious. But you've seen a lot of changes in that, and I want to talk to you a little bit about beauty and technique, because you talked about kind of the roughness of the early films and then where they've come to now. And do you think that's improved the films or detracted from them?
I think it's expanded the notion of the films. Because to be honest, it was already happening, and most of the most popular, like how Nollywood was formed, it was actually based on the roughness. People actually liked the idea of these films that probably made no sense, but had some form of an impact and the emotion that came with it. So Nollywood in itself is, how do I say this in Abroadian? I'm trying to think. A Nigerian's very form of DNA is to manage. And Nollywood in itself was managing. We didn't have the fancy cameras, or it was a tripod that you would see somebody just carrying around from shot to shot, and they had to be innovative in themselves. So there are very few that actually can say, oh, I went to film school or anything. It was that we trained ourselves. To be honest, I learned filmmaking through YouTube, which is weird. And I have 20 film credits to my name now. And I mean, I'm proud of those films, even if you're not. But it is what it is. Sorry, what was the question again? I just started ranting and I forgot.
No, I mean, I think you made a really good, that was not a rant.
I get so wrapped up in the
No, which is really good, which was a question of that, people love the roughness of the Nigerian films, but things have changed a lot, right?
Yeah.
So now they're on Netflix and now they're packaged differently. And how has that added or maybe detracted or changed the experience of the film?
I mean, another thing that's interesting is, to be honest, we have had training because all of the streamers have come into the market. And the funny thing is that they always end up learning from us, which is weird. So when she was giving her definition of African beauty, I was just seeing it because it's strength to me, it's pride. And they always walk away absorbing more from us. And the reason why they even want to come into the market is because they always keep thinking, you guys have next to nothing budgets. How do you make these beautiful stories? how do you guys stay committed to making these stories? So like I said, the evolution is like so vast of how we've gotten here, but technique has played a role, but I would just say it's the evolution of it. Like I wouldn't say like it wasn't there before, it's just allowed us to tell our stories bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's getting way bigger now because of like the investment that's come into the market in itself. So hopefully you'll see like an Independence Day version of like a Nollywood film one day. Who knows where we're going.
It's brilliant. Yolanda, how has that kind of affected the kind of clothing that you create for the characters in your films?
Oh, big time.
I hate Yolanda's budgets.
No, but I started from zero to somewhere. Yeah, so just like Mimi said, we grew from zero and grass to grace. I remember my first film, and now I think about it, I'm asking myself, how was I able to do that with the budget that was made available? So we had a survival technique, a survival mentality of how you can just manage. So we great managers, like you have this, maybe, I don't think my first film budget was up to $1,000. It was much lesser. It was like 100,000 naira. And that's, in today's foreign exchange rate, it's not even up to $200. And you had to use that to make a film, and you address every single person on the film. To see how much that has evolved to now is incredible. And it's come a long way from now. Then we didn't even have like wardrobe buses, wardrobe trucks. We didn't have all of those. We didn't even have like the steamers, but you just had to find a way to just survive and just tell the story. So I would say it was more grounded with passion. We were all just passionate about changing the narrative, making use of what we had to just tell the story. Mimi said we used to use tripods. Now we have the sliders. Now we have the cranes. You want to take the shots from different places. Now sometimes I'm like, okay, you write the story. It has to be out of country. Before we would cheat, but now you see them flying the crew over to South Africa, to Dubai, to America, to shoot that one scene that is part of telling the story. So we've gotten to a point in the industry in Nollywood where we can now say we are finally telling our stories, our truth, and we're having better budgets in telling it. The actors are also getting better because you get better performance where you pay the actor better. You get a better performance where you pay the crew better. So we do have better equipment now. We have better locations. So it's evolving. It's getting somewhere. I would say 5 years ago, or was it 3 years ago, I'm on a plane. I'm going to use the bathroom, and I'm walking back to my seat, and I could spot at least 10 different people watching Nollywood films, and at least 8 of them, I had a role in it. Nobody knows who I am, but then I'm sitting on my chair, I'm like, okay, we've arrived. Yeah, so that was so cool. Yeah, so one day, yeah.
And do you think Nollywood is still on its own terms? Because often, you know, what happens when things get big, you know, and I think probably in the global film industry, there's a lot of, and certainly in the US, a lot of things are quite racialized, right? Where you see a lot of, you know, black actors, but who owns the money, who owns the industry, et cetera. It's a little bit different in Nigeria, but certainly when you grow, sometimes you lose that autonomy and that kind of on your own termsness.
I need to answer this one, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, okay, go.
It's just because I just remember the conversation we're having, and it was a big streamer, I won't mention their names. And, you know, to be honest, like, Nigeria kind of gets swept up a bit when the white man comes. It just happens. And, you know, they were talking and talking, and I didn't say anything at the end of the conversation. I just said, sorry, I'm very blunt, forgive me. So I said to them, we don't need a white savior complex. Like, we're quite okay on our own. Yeah. So if you're coming in here, it's our way. And I think that just kind of like, like, wow, who are these people? Because that's the pride that we have. I would love to see who would try and take like a Nollywood story away. I mean, even like Woman King in itself. I don't know if you've watched it, but I'm watching it and I'm hearing Nigerian like idiosyncrasies, like how we talk and everything. I'm thinking to myself, this is a big Hollywood movie. So being Nigerian, being African is quite cool. This is actually the era to be born. So no, I don't think anybody could ever like, as they say, Nigeria they carry last. It's not possible. But yes, sorry, I've answered.
But I think, Iké, this was something that attracted to you about the industry.
Yes, actually, what Mimi said earlier on about the roughness part of it, and I mean, yeah, what drew me to Nollywood actually was, so to speak, the roughness or the rawness. Um, the reason I did the group picture, which is called the School of Nollywood, which was inspired by the 16th century mural done by Raphael that was commissioned by the Pope for the Vatican. It was called the School of Athens. It was the very point where the Europeans were moving from the Dark Ages, the age when nothing happened, so to speak, to going back to recoup the lost classical traditions and sophistications in architecture, poetry, visual arts, sculpture, and what have you, even mannerisms as well. They were recovering the Greco-Roman classical cultures, and by some extent the Egyptian culture, because Egypt came before Greco-Roman cultures actually. So it was the age of DIY. There was no Harvard, there was no Cambridge, there was no Oxford. People were trying things, they were winging it. They try, trial by error. So it was exact same situation with Nollywood. You don't have to go to film school in New York to know how to do a film. People who began doing film before didn't go to film school. Film school came later on. So they are perfectly doing well, honestly. And that's what I love about Nollywood.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yvonne, tell me what do you see as the future of Nollywood and the future of your work within it? Yolanda, sorry.
Okay,
Sorry.
That's my sister's name.
Yeah, sorry. Oh,
That was
sorry.
weird. I was like,
I was triggered.
I get called that every time.
Sorry.
So the future of Nollywood is, I think we're living our future, but if I would say a future, would be telling more of our African stories. So watching Woman King was really exciting for me. Hearing some Yoruba names, Oyo Kingdom and Oba and all of that was really exciting. And being able to tell those stories as authentic as you can tell them, as original as you can tell them in your own language, in the best form that anybody African will understand, that's when I know that we have finally evolved. So we have so many stories that are untold yet, that it's still yet to be told. So when we begin to tell those stories, then we've finally evolved, and the world can get to see us and understand us, where we're coming from, who we are, and what we stand for.
And do you think there's room in Nollywood for really pushing the boundaries around, for example, because this talk is also a little bit about representation, so representation of gender or fluidity of gender, representation of different types of identities within the Nollywood film. How do you think Nollywood can accommodate changes or challenges to those kinds of identities or different kinds of identities?
Take it.
Okay. So when you speak of representation, because I thought about it, and the way Nollywood is, or the way Nigerians are, I grew up watching me on screen. And that's something I try to identify with African Americans when I hear their stories. And even just going to South Africa, because I went there for a content market and I was hearing their stories as well. So I grew up watching strong women on my screens. But the representation I found out was lacking was, I didn't grow up seeing strong Nigerian women winning. I don't know if you understand what I mean. So there were these beautiful figures on television, but behind the scenes, they didn't really own anything. Like they weren't in power of anything, and I realized that that's what the representation that we're lacking. Because if you read about Nigeria, and I'm not saying anything that's going to get me like blocked out of Nigeria, but the laws really aren't for Nigerian women. I'm very confident that whoever wrote those laws don't like Nigerian women. Because there was even like a recent protest with women even fighting to have a certain percentage of them even being allowed on the Senate floor. So we've always had that fight. So for me, growing up, I didn't have that many. And my culture in itself, so like, and when we even say like Nigerian representation, it's so confusing because we have so many tribes, and I'm one of the minority tribes. You know, is it that Yoruba, Hausa, Igbo, but one of those 200 tribes you hear about. I'm Tiv, and the way the women of the Tiv land were, because like Tiv people are warriors, so the women in some, you know, like Sparta women, that's like how Tiv women were brought up. So we have all this strength, but you're not strong in your household. Like it's still the man and everything. So that gender equality, we've been fighting for so long, but we didn't even realize we had a problem. So it was growing and evolving and the world changing, and then you realize that you want to be that person. So when I speak of I want to make an impact, that's really where I'm coming from. I need somebody to see me or to see anything that I'm doing and realize that, oh, you can have children and you can still have this life and you can still have this husband. You will not be divorced. You will not be considered a prostitute or whatever, because that's like one of the first places that, you know, we go to in Nollywood culture in itself. I always try to tell stories that change the way you think, because I really feel like content is king. I'll give an example, like RuPaul's Drag Race in itself. Like, I've never understood what the transgenders or the gays and everything until I watched that show, and I'm always thinking like, what kind of story could I tell that could change somebody's life, or make them kinder, or think bigger, or oh, I could see a superhero. There's a movie that came out this year called King of Thieves in Nigeria, and I call it like a Marvel Yoruba film. Like it's so, like that's the highest, that's the most successful epic movie in Nigeria. And to be honest, we didn't think that those were the kind of stories that people wanted to watch, because we just like telling like these English stories and oh, we schooled in England. I mean, people want to see this. But we found that every time we told that like story of origin, people like ran to the cinema. Like that's what they were interested in. So we realized that maybe we need to tell our history more. Like maybe people can actually watch Nigerian films and say, oh, I know Zuma Rock. Like you don't have to get there like how I came here. So we have a lot of work to do. Don't get me wrong. Well, the fact that we've started without any government backing in itself is really the very foundation of the Nigerian and the Nollywood story. So we have, and to be honest, the gender equality thing now, because it's weird. When I was in South Africa, and like on the panel, I had people from Egypt and South Africa, and they were talking about, oh, how women are paid less. And I felt so awkward because I'm like, I'm really trying to identify with you guys, but women are paid more in Nigeria, like female actresses. And even if you hear like the big female producers or directors, they're women now. So we've got, that's like, okay, ticked off the list. What next? Can we keep fighting? So it's going to keep happening. We still have a lot of work to do, but gender equality and all those things, they're all being attacked one by one, and I feel like we will get there. At least that's what I'm trying to do anyways.
No, thank you, and thank you for what you do. Because I think what you pointed out is when we talk about representation, it's not just what you see, it's what's actually happening behind the scenes, so to speak. And Yolanda, have you experienced some of that tension or some of that, you know, trying to represent people in a certain way in front of the screen, but behind the screen having them treated, or watching yourself be treated in a different way?
Oh yes, that's very typical with costume and wardrobe department. Yes. In front of the screen, so the actors always feel like they know what they should look like. So that's why I started by saying that as filmmakers, we had to be truth sayers. So when you become a character, you're not yourself. You're not Alex Akubo. You're not Genevieve Naji anymore. You're playing Chiamaka Okafo or something. So she's somebody else. She's a character. She has a personality. She has a way of life, the way she should look. So it's not the way you look on IG, you're going to look on the screen. So there's always that clash in terms of how you're represented on screen and how you're represented behind the screen. But it's very important that we stay true to the story. Is it a fashion film? Yes, then we go high fashion. Is it an epic film? Then we go this way. Because sometimes you have these arguments of like, oh, blue doesn't look good on me, but you're not playing yourself on TV. And in this scene, you have to wear blue because of what the story is saying, because of what that scene is actually trying to translate. So yes, there's that clash in representation when it comes to that. But though you still have to have those conversations with them as to, okay, this is the reason for the choice, this is the reason why we have to go with this choice, this is the reason why it works for the scene, and then you understand that. Then behind the scenes, there's also the production designer might have his opinion, the director of photography might have their own opinion, the director might have an opinion, so it's a lot of work that goes behind the scene before you actually see the scene that makes the film. So in terms of representation, it's long. It's a lot of prep meetings, a lot of conversations from Zoom, physical meetings, and until we arrive at the final conclusion for what the character should be and what should look like.
And Iké, your process though was very different, right? Because you asked people to dress themselves almost, right? I mean, you actually, you got your characters, you didn't give them something to wear necessarily. It was much more collaborative.
Yeah, no, I pretty much have them pick up something from their wardrobe, but that I had recommended. Yeah.
But it was their own clothes.
Yeah, because that is the key difference between, say, fashion editorial and portraiture. Of course, in both instances, people are wearing something unless if you're doing nude, right? But if you're not doing nude, oftentimes people are wearing something. And in fashion editorial, you're selling clothes, right? So you have to show the clothes so that people can hopefully buy it. But in portraiture, it's about the self-representation of the individual, the subject. So I tend not to encourage people to even go and buy something like very new for their portraiture. I want them to go into their wardrobe and pick up some. I tend to help people pick up something from their wardrobe, but something they've owned for a long time, that they've worn, something that's worn in, is important.
And do you have because, I mean, both of you saying similar things about being the truth sayer and finding something in their self, but you're walking in very quickly, right? And you don't know them so well. How do you decide? How do you know?
Well, so knowing somebody so well would fall into the category of content, correct? Yes? I mean, so to speak, if for argument's sake. And clothes has to do with form. Okay, so in portraiture, clothing, which is like our what I call our cultural skin or cultural epidermis, which is what we are seeing with all the time. Clothing is a form. Clothing enhances and play with the human form to hopefully best advantage. In my own case, when I do portraiture, so I see myself as a master of form, so I know what works on the form. So it doesn't take me a long time to see what would work for the human form in terms of the portrait.
Mm.
Yeah.
I just only wanted to add to what you're saying, because, well, both of you anyways. It was funny enough, it was from an experience that Yolanda had on set, where an actress said, oh, her waist is not being shown enough in this outfit. And because of that, I started putting my contracts. You're not allowed to pick clothing. Like, if the director says this is what you must wear, then this is what you must wear. And it wasn't because, to be honest, they're quite rude to Yolanda's team anyways, just because. But it was just going back, and I didn't even think of the impact I had in it was, being a woman in any seat of power is tough in itself. I'm not a feminist, I don't really know what it means, but I just know what's wrong and what's right. And I remember once I was told, Mimi, you're like in this seat and you should probably start wearing heels now and like wear makeup. And I asked them, like, how did this affect my 1.3 billion I brought into the company last year? Like, what's the correlate? I'm very positive that these people that bought tickets did not think, is she wearing MAC or real? And then I thought about that it's really the content. It's how we're perceiving what a woman should depict. So when these actresses come and they say, oh, they need to look this, I respect you went and did that surgery, you do you, like that's your thing. But the thing is, like, a lot of Nigerian women, and I take this social media era so seriously, this is what they are seeing, and this is what they think is beauty. But beauty in itself is natural. I love hiring actresses that look as natural as possible. I don't care if you're light skinned, if you're dark, if you're mixed race, if you have that skin, I don't care. We are telling a story. So I love the fact that he's saying that he lets them pick what they want. It means that they found a certain comfort, that maybe this clothing is when I got my award, or this is the one that brings out the most beauty in me. So my question is, why would you take that away from somebody else? Why would you dress in a form that you think is beauty when that person is just looking at you and your strength as beauty? So because of that, I changed all the contracts. Like, no, if you're going to come to this set, it's what your character. Can you respect the process that people took 2 years, 3 years, 8 months to create this person's shoes you're about to walk into, and not be concerned about the rib surgery you did to have a tiny waist? Like, these are issues that we solve. So I understand the power of content, but I just feel like, and that's why I say they're artists and they're actors. The artists understand that the actors just come in together, paycheck, and piss off. Am I allowed to say piss off?
You just did.
Piss off again. But yeah, I think content is very important. Just emphasizing on what both of them have said.
But what you also said that interested me, Yolanda, and you mentioned it also, is how often disrespected, I guess, the costume department is on set. And often the idea of clothing is somehow not content. It's not legit. It's somehow superficial. It doesn't have the value as the DOP or, someone like hauling big gear around. But it seems that what's your take on that?
It's very interesting. As a costume designer, sometimes I have to play therapist. I have to play mommy. I have to massage so many egos. Why? Because there's a film that has to be made, and we have to make the film in a limited time. So therapists, in terms of, I have to understand you're having a good day or a bad day. So I have to take you through the process. These are the outfits. Can we do the fitting? What do you like? What are you comfortable in? But we still have to stay within what the story is trying to tell and not derail. So for example, I remember looking at the Nollywood portrait, and the first thing I said to myself was, it's a good thing Iké just answered that. I was like, who chose this clothes? Because I know these people, and if they had to really pick what they wanted to wear, you would not see the subject, which is the Nollywood portrait. You will see Nollywood fashion. So I was able to see them in a different way that they've ever been photographed before, because I had a feeling that the artist was also a part of what they picked, because he saw and he would have said, okay, I don't think this will work. Do you have something else? Because sometimes we confuse photography for fashion editorial. Sometimes we confuse filmmaking for fashion editorial. So that's why I said, what is the truth? Is it a fashion film? If it's a fashion film, we're going to tell fashion from beginning to the end. But if it's not a fashion film, we're telling a real story here, like what's your day-to-day life? What would you wear on a normal day? If it's raining, what would you authentically wear on that day? So I saw that through the portrait. So it was easy to just admire the beauty of the work and just see the skin tone, the texture, the hair, the choices, like when the red, everyone understood why this person had to wear red in that photo, why this person had to wear black and gold in that picture. It was really, really important. So it's a hard place to apply. It's like walking through the Red Sea with some of the actors. It's intense. It's really, really intense. But it's a joy when you work with the actors that we call the artists that understand I'm here to work. Anything you give me, that is what my character is supposed to wear, and they wear it and they carry it. Because I believe that you're not yourself, you're playing somebody else, so you should understand that that person has a life, has a beginning and an end. And then when they say cut, you can go back to being who you want to be. Yeah, so I've scaled so many, and so many more to cross.
I mean, I really like, I guess, the tension that all of you talk about kind of being your authentic self, but also the importance of sometimes another person to even enhance that.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Sometimes it's not just identity, maybe it's not just about what you think you are, but it requires someone else to see it. And it feels in the film, in the costumes, in the portraits, that marriage between the self and the representer is what creates a really beautiful kind of truth. I'd like to hand it over to anyone in the audience if you want to make comments or ask questions of our panelists. If we don't have a roving mic, I'll throw you mine. Go ahead.
Hello, everyone. My name is Leslie. I just want to say thank you so much for coming out. Winnie, I know you talked about not having professional training for film, but if you could do it differently, would you go back and get professional training? As well as Yolanda and Iké, how important do you think professional training is for the mediums of work that you all do?
Honestly, no, I wouldn't. I feel like that's what made me me. So how I even became a producer is actually a very funny story. The director of the film we're about to see is I walked on set because there was this story about this 29-year-old woman, and she just wanted to get married, and she was doing anything she could to get the ring, and I saw myself in this woman, and I said, you know what, this movie has to be made. So I started looking for the money through my company, and we raised it. So I really was going to set as an EP, and I walk onto the set, and the director just points to me and says, okay, that's the producer of the film, everybody buy it. And I was like, sorry? So that's actually how I became a producer. I had to go home that night and start watching like YouTube videos. Oh, what does a producer do? Oh my God, like, so I feel like if I didn't go through that hurdle, I wouldn't be as passionate I am now. Because I did go to school. Like, but I wasn't that passionate about what I did in school. I studied economics, or rather I majored in economics and finance, but I was a business administration student. And I don't know if there's like Igbo blood in me, you know, they're Igbo, but like, I love the business of film. I love how you can take this content and it just becomes this investment for the rest of your life. I don't know if I went to school if I would be this passionate about it. I'm constantly in training. I take as much, I've taken like cinematography, post-production. I constantly keep trying to learn, because to be honest, filmmaking is like technology, it's like the freaking iPhone, isn't it? Every year there's like an S or a Z or a Z or a P. I don't know much about iPhones. I'm Android, I'm proud, so I don't know, but I always try and keep evolving in that space. So I'm happy I didn't, and I'm just learning what it is now, and it's going to keep going and going. And it's weird because I constantly teach, and I keep thinking, oh my God, I'm such a fraud. What am I teaching you guys? I learned it on the job. So no, I wouldn't go back and do it now.
What about either of you two?
Okay, I didn't go to film school either. I stumbled upon being a costume designer, from making clothes to being a stylist, then being a costume designer. Would I have gone to school for it? Yes, I would have. That was how I got here. Anyways, I was trying to save money to go to fashion school, and I started doing film, and then I've done it for over 15 years. And I would say, maybe because I went to university, I also went through a process of school. School is important because it teaches you process as well. And when you go through school, you pass through the school passes through you, you learn one or two things. Because I realized that on set, when I see those that have a bit of tertiary education, they're totally different from those that don't actually have, because high school is not enough. You still need another form. So that could also come in just taking short courses. It might be YouTube classes as well. It's all part of schooling. You don't necessarily have to go to a four-wall compound to say you went to school, because it teaches you how to be a good manager, how to understand why you're here, what you're here for, and what you're supposed to do whilst you're here. Because half the time, most people just come in and just feel like it's show business. I'm here to take a picture with the actor. That's not what you're here for. You're here to work. Do you have a picture with the actor? Well, that's after your day's job is done. Like, I had an interview, they were like, oh, do you have pictures with the actors? I said, no. And I just realized that in over 10 years of doing this, I really don't have like pictures with the actors, because half the time I'm busy. So if you see any picture, I'm probably tying somebody's bow tie or wearing somebody's shoes and all of that. But I did learn so much on the job, because that's the best place to learn in training. It's not a lot of theory, it's more practical. So the more practical stuff you can get yourself to do, the better. You learn faster, you learn more.
Thank you. Do you want to take a stab at it, or?
I think that there is arguments to be made for both sides. Having some formal training or even a modicum of formal training can go a long way. But that said, there's also a danger of being overtrained or being overeducated. So I think I recall one interview of the opera singer Maria Callas, where she was interviewed and she talked about technique and the heart. She said that when she's singing, the way she was trained, she's singing with the head, but the heart must also work. Because when you use too much head, the training and education, it become too technical and lack emotion and passion. So it's a very delicate balance of between having being self-taught or autodidactic and being formally trained. But there is argument for both sides. I think I would be more in the middle than taking sides. Yeah.
We've come to the end of this discussion, and I want to give you an opportunity to just tell us what we're going to expect from your incredible film that is going to screen tonight, to just shift gears a little bit. So maybe just tell us, just very quickly, what's coming up and what to look out for.
The best film. So Obara'm, the title itself is from the land of the Igbos. It's one of the most authentic stories I think I've ever had the pleasure in telling. It's so beautiful in its truth, and I think it really reflects who we are as Nigerians. I'm sure you've read the synopsis of it, but it was really born from a place of pain and pleasure, which is weird, because the combination in itself is like hot and cold making steel. And the director and the producer just really wanted me to even thank everybody for even watching this film and spreading the word as much as possible. I just hope that as you watch it, you see a bit of yourselves in it, or if you know somebody going through it, you can actually help. But it's definitely one to watch, not because like I made it, but like it's the truth. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed the film.
So thank you, everybody. And the film, Terrell, is downstairs or here? Oh, it's here. Fantastic. You don't even have to move. That's amazing. I would strongly encourage you to, are we starting right at 8 or is? Which is, oh, we have a bit of time, right? All right, so in between, I think what would, if you want, is to just have a sneak peek at the Before Nollywood exhibition behind you. And if you go through the doors, if you haven't seen it already, Iké Udé Nollywood Portraits is on over here. But thank you all very, very much for coming. Hope to see you during the week, and have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.